So last year, I called the Area 51 one of Dell's best gaming laptops. The design was unique in that it gave me space vibes, the invisible hinge and the glass thermal window that lets you peek through the internal hardware. It just looked awesome. I loved it. This year, Dell is back with a new one. And at first glance, well, there's only two new things about this laptop. There's a new CPU, and for the first time, they're offering an OLED option with the Area 51. So let's quickly talk about this chip, because Dell is adding Intel's Core Ultra 9 290HX Plus, and it's an optional upgrade over the base model that comes with the Ultra 9 255HX. Now last year, we tested the sample with the Ultra 9 275HX, and honestly, the difference between the older Air Lake HX chip and the newer Air Lake HX Plus chips is a 900 MHz boost in die-to-die frequency. There's also support for Intel's Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4. But the rest aside, they both feature the same core count and the cache size. The second new feature added to this laptop, as I mentioned earlier, is an OLED panel. I know Dell is very late to the game here, but you do have that option to switch from an already good IPS panels on the existing Area 51 base model, and it still maintains that Quad HD Plus resolution at a wicked fast 240 Hz refresh rate. And interestingly, it also comes with an anti-glare coating on top, unlike the usual glossy finish that you find with OLED gaming laptops. So that certainly helps alleviate the reflections and the glare if you're using this in a brighter environment. And visually, look, this thing is great. The contrast ratios, it's a night and day difference compared to last year's panel. The blacks, they're really black, and the colors are just really rich. Being this an OLED, it covers 100% sRGB, 94% Adobe RGB, and 100% DCI-P3, which isn't far off from the IPS spec, but it's actually more color accurate with a delta E value of 0.82. Remember, the lower the number, the higher the color accuracy. Now, the one problem with this panel is that it measures dimmer than last year's. We got around 450 nits of peak SDR performance with the OLED model versus 570 nits with last year's IPS display. That's a 30% drop, which is certainly something to be aware of. Now, the other issue, and this might be a minor quirk, is that if you are sensitive to flickering, well, unfortunately, this OLED panel does exhibit a lot of it. Compared to the IPS panel, you're basically getting none of that. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. As for the rest of the laptop, well, in terms of build quality, you're not going to notice a difference between this and the previous generation. It's super solid, and I wouldn't expect to travel with this thing because it weighs around 7.5 pounds or 3.4 kilos. And this won't fit into a standard size backpack because of this extra thermal shelf at the back. Plus, you are also going to be lugging around a massive 360 watt power supply, which is also, it's massive. Like, this thing is just heavy. And when you combine that with the laptop itself, yeah, I feel like you might need to get a suitcase or something like that. I also want to mention this invisible hinge design. This thing opens like butter. It is super solid and robust. It is just absolutely one of the best hinges that you can find on a gaming laptop. You also get the glowing glass trackpad. That's pretty cool. I think it gives the Area 51 some character, and from a functional standpoint, it's super smooth and responsive with gestures baked into Windows. The keyboard layout is pretty much the same. It hasn't changed compared to the previous gen. I do appreciate the dedicated keys for volume adjust, and the keys, while not being mechanical, which is an option that you can add on, this is the standard setup. It feels awesome. Like, this thing is really, really robust. I feel like Dell has nailed down the right amount of travel distance, just the right amount of feedback. I love it. Now, if we look at the port setup, they're all essentially located at the back, which I guess is good for cable management, but I still wish if they added a couple of USB ports on the left and right hand side just for easy access, because sometimes it's just really hard to, plug everything at the back. So, you get your HDMIs, your Thunderbolt 5 ports, you've got your USB Type A ports, which, by the way, is still stuck to USB 3.2 Gen 1 at 5 gigabits per second. Why? This is a $5,000 laptop. Air Lake HX Plus does support Gen 2. It just doesn't make any sense for a laptop that is supposed to be sort of their flagship gaming device. It's definitely a disappointment from Alienware. Now, I know you're here for the performance stuff, so let's just get right into it. Does the new Air Lake HX Plus CPU bring any tangible performance benefits over the 275HX in the exact same chassis? Now, we have a few other gaming laptops thrown into this comparison. So we have the Legion Pro 7i with its younger sibling, the Legion Pro 5i, with the same Core Ultra 9 275HX from the previous generation Area 51, although they are running at different power levels. We also have the ROG Strix G16 with the Ryzen 9 9955HX running at 130 watts. And finally, there's the Razer Blade 16 with the Panther Lake Ultra 9 386H running at a modest 70 watts. Now, I should mention that both Area 51 laptops share the exact same memory configuration and the same RTX 5080 laptop GPU. And honestly, guys, it's basically flat. Multi-core and Cinebench R23 and Cinebench 2024 are within 1% between each other. Single core gets a respectable bump, but not by all that much. And with real-world rendering applications like Blender and Houdini, both laptops were practically identical. We're talking maybe a second between each other. That's really not that much. But the creative apps tell a slightly better story. Handbrake came in about 2% faster than last year. The Lightroom exports have dropped about 8%. Photoshop performance has also got a nice boost by about 7%. And if you look at video editing applications like Adobe Premiere Pro, that thing finished around 4%. But if we flip to DaVinci Resolve Studio, the export times have pretty much remained the same. And I should mention that these are GPU-bound applications, so because they share the same GPU, the encoding times really don't make that much of a difference, but it is nice to see that little bump with Adobe Premiere Pro in terms of export times. Again, not super significant, but it's there. If we look at GPU-accelerated apps, Handbrake basically was identical, but if you look at Blender, the rendering times dropped by 40% compared to last year's model on the exact same RTX 5080 laptop GPU. I think that boost definitely comes down to the newer driver optimizations with that application. So if you own last year's Area 51 or a laptop with a 275HX processor, the new HX Plus chip, it won't blow you away. Now, if we switch over to gaming, this is where the CPU gets more interesting. So we tested 9 games at 1600p. If you look at the average frame rates, they are mostly flat compared to the previous gen. It's exactly what you would expect from those synthetic scores, right? But there are a couple of outliers. If you look at Counter-Strike 2, the performance jumped by almost 20%. And if we switch to Indiana Jones, that jumped by about 13%. But the averages are in the whole story. If you actually take a closer look at the 1% lows, like the stutters, the little dips that you see here and there, that's almost up by 40% in some of these titles. For example, Indiana Jones, it's around 16%. Starfield went up by 18%. Baldur's Gate 3 went up by 14%. Those are real consistent patterns across 4 different games. Now, Cyberpunk and Warhammer 3 didn't get that much of a boost in performance, but the takeaway is the average frames per second didn't really move, but the 1% lows got a good amount of boost, which is a welcoming upgrade for a chip refresh. Now, if you look at the thermal system of this laptop, it is pretty solid out of the box. But if you're looking to boost its performance, not just for the Area 51, but for any laptop, there are some accessories that you can invest in to help you with that. We've been using the Razer laptop cooling pad, and we've been loving it so far. It works on 2 levels. There's passively cooled by elevating the laptop to improve the airflow underneath, and you can also run it actively as well with an adjustable fan. Now, in general, this thing supports laptops from 14 inches to 18 inches. It comes with different magnetic frames to fit various sizes and chassis types. And the smart cooling feature automatically adjusts fan speeds based on live CPU and GPU temperature readings. So what does it actually do for the Alienware Area 51? Well, with the cooling pad set to 1100 RPM, the 290HX Plus and the RTX 5080 combo puts up some pretty solid numbers. The GPU ran 4 degrees cooler compared to the stock setup, while also drawing a bit more power, and it was also able to maintain that 2.4 GHz clock speed. And that translates beautifully into gaming as well. Running Cyberpunk at 1600p in the Ultra preset, this laptop in its stock configuration averaged around 101 frames per second, but with the cooling pad, it jumped up to almost 107 frames per second, so about a 5% jump. So it's certainly a nice to have accessory for those long gaming sessions. Now, under the hood, this thing looks pretty familiar to the previous generation Area 51. It is one of the cleanest PCBs layouts that I've seen on a gaming laptop. There is easy access to 2 SODIMM slots. Maximum supported capacity is 64 gigabytes. The primary NVMe SSD is located right over here, and the 290HX Plus CPU comes with a Gen 5 SSD, and naturally, the drive speeds over the Gen 4 drive on the previous gen is more than double in both read and write performance. Now, I was expecting similar battery life on this year's Area 51 compared to the previous gen, since they both feature the same 95 watt-hour battery, but that's not what happened. So for light use cases like web browsing, the battery life actually improved by about 20% over last year's Area 51, which is certainly a welcoming update. But the second you start playing a video, the script flips the other way around. With our YouTube playback test, the battery life went down by an hour compared to last year's model with the 275HX chip. And if you're trying to game on battery, it gets even worse. I think the main culprit here is the new OLED display, since they do tend to draw more power compared to the standard IPS panels. So it's just a word of caution for those who are looking to get this particular screen. It is going to affect battery life. Okay, the last thing that I want to address here is the pricing situation. So previous generation Area 51 with the same specs except for the CPU ran you around $3,350. But Dell has that on sale frequently. This year, it's $4,430. That's not a small jump. That's over $1,000 more than what we basically pretty much spent the entire video establishing, that you're basically getting a mostly flat CPU with a dimmer display and a penalty on battery life. Now, part of that isn't even Dell's fault, or at least not entirely. We're in the middle of a genuine memory crisis, guys. The RAM prices across the entire industry have been climbing up for months, and it's hitting every laptop manufacturer, not just Alienware. So the price hike is basically a reflection of the current market conditions. Not to mention, if there's one thing that I've learned covering these laptops for over years, you never pay full price for one of these laptops. Dell puts these things on sale frequently. That $4,430 sticker is basically starting bid. It's not a real number. And historically, we've seen those configurations drop by hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars. So if you're seriously looking for a laptop, specifically the Area 51, take that number with a grain of salt, and I would say just wait for a sale, because yeah, I would call Dell as sort of like the Canadian Tire of laptops, just because you just never buy anything at full price. That being said, if you're still in the market for a gaming laptop with a faster CPU and of course a faster GPU, you definitely might want to skip the Area 51, because I just find that this thing is a little too bulky for my taste. And if you notice from the benchmarks, the Legion Pro 7i just looks like a really great value. This thing actually tied, or in fact beat, the Area 51 with the 290HX Plus chip paired with the 5080. And interestingly, at the time of making this video, the Pro 7i with an RTX 5090 and a 275HX is going for less than what the Area 51 with the 5080 is going for. So I guess you're probably going to get a better value. Not to mention, Legion's also pumping more power into that chassis, and it's a lot smaller than the Area 51, so the writing is on the wall. If you are looking for something compact with just an insane amount of performance, I would still direct you towards the Pro 7i from Legion. But that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about the Area 51 and your thoughts on Air Lake HX Plus. Is the new chip refresh something exciting? And if you have picked up one of these laptops, I'm curious to hear your experience in the comments down below. I'm Iber with Hardware Canucks. Thank you so much for watching. I've been standing for almost an hour trying to record this, but yeah, I'm gonna go take a break. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. And don't forget to spend responsibly.